Good evening. Hello and welcome to this SOE panel discussion. What does the future hold for young engineers? My name is Will Dalrymple. I'm the editor of Transport Engineer and Operations Engineer, which go to members of IRTE, BES, and iPlan-T. Both titles have a free-to-view website and free email newsletter. Just search on the magazine title. The Society of Operations Engineers, SOE, serves 16,000 qualified professionals in over 40 countries worldwide. As one of 35 professional engineering institutions in the UK, SOE has the responsibility to support individuals and organizations to operate in safe working environments using modern practices in a technically proficient way. The Society is licensed by both Engineering Council and Society for the Environment and use its remit from them to improve the careers of our members and the wider engineering community. The Society offers special grades of membership for students and apprentices, which is completely free and introduces you to the benefits of membership. Some of the benefits are monthly electronic copies of Operations Engineer and Transport Engineer, access to SOE's online resource library of 2,000 technical CPD articles, and networking events such as this one. I'm honored to be joining 7 expert panelists this evening to discuss their careers. This panel session will examine different career paths and qualification routes, highlight opportunities in different sectors and companies, as well as exploring what young people can do to succeed. But for now, I would like to turn to each speaker in turn and ask them a specific question. Our first speaker is Ian Hoare, an engineering manager, capability electronic systems at BAE Systems. His first industry posting was with construction equipment brand Komatsu, and then moved to a tier 1 automotive supplier, and has spent the last decade in flight control and display systems at BAE. So Ian, you've jumped between 3 sectors over your career: off-highway, mainstream automotive, and military aerospace. And there were postings all around the world. To what degree have you found your engineering skills transferable?
So thank you, Will. As you've said, I've had a very varied career and had opportunity to work in several different sectors of engineering. I studied mechanical engineering at Loughborough University, which provided a good foundation to start from. And I guess as I was coming to the end of my studies, I really didn't know what area of mechanical engineering to go into. I just knew that I enjoyed engineering and wanted to find a challenge. I think I recall I applied to a truck company, a military vehicle company, and a welding machine company. But really, it was a poster at university that was offering a graduate position in Japan that really caught my attention. And after several rounds of tests and interviews, I was able to find myself on a plane to Japan, where I spent 3 years. Um, my experience in Japan certainly had its challenges, but it enabled me to experience a new culture, to learn a new language, and almost developing my engineering knowledge and skills, where I was designing hydraulic excavators. As a mechanical engineer, the work was very varied. It ranged from designing engine mounts, where I was looking at resonant frequencies and damping, to installing radiators and cooling fans. I was looking into airflows, thermal calculations, looking at the body frames and supports, and the panel designs around it. Um, I got involved in operator seat design, looking at ergonomics, adjustment of mechanisms, and was also involved in pneumatic systems, hydraulic control systems, and gear systems. But best of all from my time with Komatsu was I learned how to drive a big digger. So what I quickly found was that the work of an engineer is really a mix of creativity and invention combined with analysis and calculations to ensure that your solutions are really robust to meet the requirements. And I found that applying the academic foundation gained from university and interacting with more experienced engineers around me, I was really able to turn my hand to any of the tasks that I was given and to solve the problems that I was presented with. The reward comes when you see prototypes produced and tested, problems ironed out, and your designs going into production. After 3 years in Japan, I moved back to the UK, where I continued to work for Komatsu at a new development centre in the northeast of England. But going back to the original question on transferable skills, I want to touch on the next step of my career, which was to get myself registered as a chartered engineer. So in the UK, there's a national body called the Engineering Council, who've created a standard for engineers to be assessed against with 3 levels of achievement. These are engineering technician, incorporated engineer, and chartered engineer. The interesting thing here is that this standard is the same regardless of what type of engineer you are. You can be mechanical, civil, electrical, electronic, aeronautical, biotechnology, whatever. It's basically the same standard for everybody. And this standard identifies 5 generic areas of competence, and it's really through these that the transferability comes. So the first is knowledge and understanding, where we're looking at what level of knowledge and understanding you might have, but also how you apply this. The second is around the design and development of processes, systems, services, and products. And again, this is around what methods do you use? Can you conduct research, identify opportunities, and solve problems? Um, the third is responsibility management and leadership. So can you plan, organize, lead, and at what level responsibility? The fourth is communication and interpersonal skills. So are you able to communicate, present, discuss proposals, and show good social skills? And the fifth one is around professional commitment, which is looking at, do you recognize your obligations to society, the profession, the environment, and work safely and ethically? So when you look at engineers having these generic competencies combined with their specific knowledge and skills for the particular stream of engineering they're in, it becomes easy to see them being transferable. So if I jump back to my career, after 8 years with Komatsu, I moved to a company developing door latches for the automotive industry. So this was completely different to excavators, completely different scale of production, but I was still applying fundamental engineering knowledge. And through these 5 competencies, it was very easy to adapt and show my value to the new company. My work there took me back to Japan for a couple of years. I then went on to the USA for 3 years and ended my time back in the UK. And I was managing a global program for Ford, which set up production for 4 million door latches per year on 4 production lines that was in China and France. And we were delivering to customers in Germany, Spain, China, Taiwan, Japan, Australia, and the UK. And we had a supply base all around the world. So I then spent my life traveling the globe, visiting suppliers, customers, but all the while basically applying these 5 core engineering competencies, having knowledge and understanding, problem solving ability, leadership, communication, interpersonal skills, and professional commitment. So I worked in the automotive industry for 13 years. And then because I started a family and was really missing my kids growing up, I decided the travel wasn't for me anymore. So moved roles, had the opportunity to join BAE Systems, which again was a big change of industry. So I now work on highly complex safety critical avionics systems for aircraft. This is flight control computers, flight control sticks, and display systems. But exactly the same process and problem solving applies here as in any engineering company. I still need to use my leadership, communication, interpersonal skills, just with a different group of people and a different product. And I think all through my career, I found every day exciting and interesting. I'm always challenged. And it could be looking at technical issues, it could be managing people working for me, or joining communication events like this. And I'd like to add, perhaps to finish, that most of my moves, either within one company or between companies, really came about because I was recognized as being capable and competent and able to thrive in whichever environment I found myself in. And I think that's really all due to the transferable skills that you do develop as an engineer.
Brilliant. Well, Ian, thanks very much for opening things. You've covered a lot of ground in that, and so thanks very much. And I'd like to come back to chartered status and indeed the other registration levels later on. But for now, let's move on to the experience of another of our panelists, Drew Stinton, technical lead for Shell's lubricant distributors in the UK, the Baltics, and Marco distributors in Ireland. Now, you've had something of a dream career in that you've been able to work trackside in Formula One as a trackside analyst. So can you tell us about how you got there and what you did and what it was like?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Will, for that nice introduction. So yeah, it was a dream job. And I started my very early career at Shell as the engineer apprentice, doing an advanced engineering apprenticeship through a company called TTE. and once within TTE, Shell actually sponsored all studies up to HND level. My first role in Shell was a chassis dyno technician. So you may recall a few years ago a really nice Audi advert where they put a car on a rolling road, and you could see the car like standing still but functioning as you'd have it on the road. Shell used to, in research and technology, screen new fuels and lubricants in this way, and that was my first role. And as I mentioned, yes, so I did my HND in operations engineering, and at the time of actually completing the HND, I was awarded with Student of the Year. And it was a combination really to get the F1 job. It was a combination of hard work and also timing as well. So as I got awarded the Student of the Year and got this qualification, it was actually the time I actually applied for the F1 job, and actually was able to go into the interview and say, look, this is what I've achieved so far, and these are my ambitions. So what the trackside job actually entailed was very, very diverse. So I was the lead on the facility maintenance. So Shell is the innovation partner for Scuderia Ferrari, which basically means that the products that are in the F1 car are completely co-engineered with Ferrari and Shell, bespoke fluids. And once at the track, these fluids need to go through quite a strict quality control process as well to comply with the FIA regulations. So I was the analyst on site working in a fully functioning laboratory, testing these products. And as you can imagine, had the luxuries of traveling all around the world, experiencing different cultures, very, very similar to Ian, in quite a stressful environment as well. So high pressure, had to get these results out fast to Ferrari. You were a technical liaison with Ferrari engineers at the track. So if there's a problem, you need to methodically work through, identify the root cause to ensure the product wouldn't cause any mechanical issues out on the circuit. Potentially we were doing oil condition monitoring on site as well to ensure that the engines weren't going to fail out on the circuit as well. And yeah, extremely diverse. So I did that for six seasons, equivalent to like 150 days away from home each season. So quite intensive on the travel. Also involved in major projects. So the lab itself, laboratories generally are meant to travel around the world. I was involved in major capex projects to upgrade the facility, upgrade the instruments, and make the facility lighter as well. So completely redesigned the lab that we used from the ground up to save CO2 emissions and also weight, because weight would equal cost when it's being air freighted around the world. So yeah, all these combined into one, and the reason for progressing and moving away from the team as well, to be honest, was part of career progression and starting a family. So that's the only reason why I stopped. But yeah, it was such a fantastic role, great memories to recall. Even somewhere on the internet at the minute now, there's quite a cheesy video of me interviewing Sebastian Vettel. Stories like this and sort of say memories you're never going to forget. I was fully integrated as part of the Ferrari team, so we sort of won together, lost together, and yeah, every day you woke up proud to throw on that Ferrari uniform and go to work as well. So yeah, advice to the people that are interested in engineering and studying: you've got to do something that you enjoy. And yeah, hard work really does pay off, and hopefully sort of my experience, which I've just shared there, proves that. So by getting Student of the Year in the HND opened doors for me. And while I was actually in the F1 role as well, Shell then decided to further sponsor my studies. So I did a part-time degree as well. So I've got a Bachelor of Engineering degree, again, fully sponsored by Shell. And it sort of shows as well the dedication as well to the company to actually pursue this part-time, as well as doing quite an intensive job in terms of working hours and commitments as well, to be fair.
Brilliant, Drew. So, so during the races, can I just ask, were you in the lab the whole time, or did you get to be in the pit?
I was a combination of the two. I've actually made an appearance as well, albeit for like a nanosecond on the Netflix Drive to Survive series, where you see me walking up and down the paddock to collect these oil samples, which we analyse before and after every session. Whenever there was a problem, for example, if there was a leak on one of the F1 cars, quite often you'd find me sort of in the garage on all fours with a swab to try and determine where the leak was actually coming from. There was analytical techniques we could do on site to determine whether it was engine oil, gearbox oil, hydraulic oil, thermal oil. The list was endless with the amount of products that Shell actually supplied to Ferrari. So yeah, really hands-on, and yeah, such a fantastic role, to be honest. And now the role I'm in now, equally, in terms of responsibilities, is fun. Every day is a school day. So now I'm the technical focal point for all of Shell's official lubricants distributors. So when they have a technical issue, I help the technical community within the distributors to find the root cause, resolve it, offer new improved lubrication recommendations to improve efficiency and stuff of all types of machinery, whether it be automotive all the way throughout industry, gas engines. It's very, very broad, and very similar to what Ian mentioned as well. The skills that you gain as well with travel, being involved in the sort of major projects are completely transferable. So even in my development plan now within Shell, I'm quite open-minded in terms of my next career move, whether to go into sales or something like this as well. So yeah.
Brilliant. Drew, thanks very much. I hope we can get back into that in a little while. Just wanted to make an operational point. We've had a question already. The webinar is being recorded, and the SOE, to answer the question, will be posting this, but there might be a little bit of a delay. So don't feel you need to take notes right now, but I would encourage you to ask questions using the Q&A function. More questions we have, the more we can talk about later on in the discussion stage. But for now, I would like to turn to our next speaker, Thomas Baker, Academic Lead for Engineering at the University of Hertfordshire. After receiving a university degree, you worked in industry, including automotive and utilities, and in project management. But since 2007, your career has been in universities, first at Bath and then the University of Hertfordshire. So a key decision for young engineers is to decide whether to go down the apprenticeships route or university. Please, would you offer your advice to this point with reference to your own personal story?
Sure, thanks. And thanks for the opportunity to be here with you. It's thrilling to spend time with other engineers and also listening to the exciting stories. And if there's any young engineers listening, or young people thinking about engineering, I think we'll all tell you that we love what we do. Engineering really is a thrilling area to be in. My own story, just briefly, is if you're wondering about an accent, it's South African. I grew up and studied in South Africa, where I've spent most of my adult life in the UK. I studied a degree called electromechanical engineering, which was sort of a combination between electrical heavy current and mechanical engineering. And I went and worked on a power station as my first job, doing as sort of a plant engineer, really. In South Africa, there's a recognized discipline called plant engineering, which is why being a member of the IPlanty is perfect for me. I then moved to VW, working in their paint shop, which is where most of the heavy plant is. Later on, I moved elsewhere in the plant, looking after the machines which made the cars. I've never actually built any cars, but I looked after the machines that made them. And then moving to the UK, worked for General Motors. I worked for Eurostar, looking after the trains. Again, looking after the facilities that looked after the trains, and later also in water treatment, more in a sort of project leadership role, refurbishing water treatment works. And then in 2007, an opportunity came along as a part-time lecturer, as a visiting lecturer at Bath, which I took, and found that I absolutely loved the teaching side of it. And sort of a few years later, in 2011, managed to get a full-time job teaching at the University of Hertfordshire, where I teach more sort of manufacturing management, that kind of stuff, drawing my time mostly from the auto industry. So that's my story in a nutshell. I mean, onto the question of apprenticeship or university courses, I personally don't think there's a one size fits all answer for this. I mean, certainly, and and when I was considering this, which was back in the 1980s, apprenticeship, they were quite two very defined career paths. Certainly, when I was a boy, apprenticeship really meant walking around with a toolbox for lots of years, and if you went to university, it was another quite defined career trajectory. And I'm glad to say I don't think it's so defined these days anymore. And certainly, I think both avenues will get you to quite a senior level and get you to a career which you're going to enjoy. And I suppose my advice to young people, and I can offer this advice, but if I have to be honest, I never did this myself. But my advice to somebody thinking of setting out would be to ask yourself where you want to be in 10 years' time. And certainly when we meet our first year students, that's the one thing I press them on. Like, where do you want to be? Where do you want to be? And depending on where you think you're going to end up or where you'd like to end up, you might find that a university degree or a more apprenticeship role would be a better route. And of course, in the UK, for our international listeners, I'll just explain this briefly, but in the UK, there is such a thing called the degree apprenticeship, where you basically get both. And that's sort of a government initiative from a few years ago. So even on our own degree programs, we've got a number of people who work 4 days a week at their companies and then come and spend a day a week with us as part of our degree class. So that's a third option. So I think it's about trying to find out where you want to be. If you want to be a university lecturer one day, I would suggest a purely academic route might get you there quicker. So I think it's about trying to find where you want to be. I think the second point is also to follow your own aptitude and your own interests. If you hate studying, and if the thought of doing mathematics and differential equations and all this kind of stuff really makes you tremble, then maybe university is not going to be the avenue that you're going to enjoy most. Whereas if you like me would read physics textbooks for fun, then maybe university career is going to be more to your own sort of aptitude. So my real honest answer would be try and find both routes are going to equip you to be a great engineer, but there's different ways to get there. And I think if you can identify the route that resonates with your own learning style, learning from a textbook as you might in engineering university may not be the best route to get there. So I'd encourage young people to sort of try and find what resonates with your style of learning, because we all learn differently. And the third thing I would suggest is just where's the opportunities? If you get an opportunity to do an apprenticeship and the door opens to you and there's a very clear closed door at university, well, then I would say go for it in the university situation. I mean, and conversely, I spoke with a young gentleman the other day, I kid you not, in the Aldi car park. We got chatting, he asked what I did, I told him, he said, gee, I'd love to be an engineer and I've been trying to get an apprenticeship, but I just can't seem to crack it. So I said to him, well, there are bridging courses which will, because his grades at school weren't what he needed to get to the university. And I said, look, there are bridging programs which will help you get to university. And so for this young chap, he's been trying for years to get into apprenticeships, a bridging program might get him there. So I think there's a level of pragmatism, see where the opportunities are, see how you can get the doors open. So that'd be my sort of advice to young folks. But I think both are great avenues to becoming engineers, which is a wonderful profession. I think we'll all agree. Thanks, Phil.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much. And staying with the topic of learning, then, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Jamie Dunn, who began her career with an apprenticeship and is now National EC&I Engineer. That's Electrical Control and Instrumentation at Veolia. So Jamie, as an apprentice, you worked in an oil refinery and have since had roles in a water company and in general industry. During that time, your role has widened from site to regional to national scope, and you are now studying for a master's in engineering. So you haven't stopped learning on the job. What drives you to keep developing?
Hi, everybody. I think it's going off from what Thomas just said, really. It was what, passion for what you do. I have an interest in what I do. Just going off the back of what Thomas was just talking about whether you go take the academic route, like university, graduate, or apprenticeship route, it really is about what interests you. So at 16, I knew that I was pretty much done with studying. I didn't want any more exams. We'd just done our GCSEs. I really wasn't feeling it, but obviously keep your options open. So I applied to college, had a backup plan, and I applied for an apprenticeship at the local oil refinery. Funny enough, I was interested in Formula One, so I was very jealous to hear Drew talking earlier. The plan was to, at the time, do an instrumentation apprenticeship with the potential of leaving the door open that I could go into Formula one day. But things change. But yeah, so there we go. So that's how I got into my apprenticeship. And what drives me to keep developing is the interest in what I'm doing, and lifelong learning and reinvention I spoke about in the bio as well. I really believe about lifelong learning. So I'm not saying that you have to keep doing college course after college course or anything like that, but you kind of do it naturally. Like, the world is constantly changing and developing, and what the latest technology was when I was growing up is considered obsolete now. So, it's about adapting to new technologies, and certainly in my job role, I have to do that, and developing trends and sort of keeping ahead of the game if you can, and you learn naturally. Regarding reinvention, I think to be a high achiever, and this, Thomas also spoke about this, it's you need a certain level of emotional intelligence, I'd say. So you can get training in emotional intelligence. It's actually a key tool to have. It will help you. There's going to be tough times in engineering and or anything in life, and it will help you sort of cope and navigate your way through. And it just gives you more awareness, not just of your emotions, but other people's. You're able to manage things in positive ways. So going back to the drive thing, you're able to keep yourself motivated. You're able to make it relevant. It helps you relieve stress, because whatever path we choose, we're going to experience stress. So to be able to naturally relieve that helps you communicate effectively and overcome challenges. And I absolutely believe that if you have emotional intelligence as a core skill, that anyone can achieve anything. So just because of the mindset that you're given and how you negotiate around scary things. So opportunities will present themselves, take opportunities. It's very easy to talk yourself out of things, but just test yourself a little bit, push your boundaries, and that keeps you motivated in itself, and do things that are out of your comfort zone, like this.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much, Jamie. And that's really interesting point, particularly for an engineering body to talk about a subject like emotional intelligence. Do you think it also helps with management and team working with colleagues? Because I mean, you must be in group projects all the time and dealing with colleagues, and who knows what their kind of state is.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, so emotional intelligence isn't just mental health or anything like that. It is really about how you channel your fears, I suppose, and how you motivate yourself. Like, it's really important for high achievers to be able to motivate themselves and turn bad things into good, and see the positives in things and go, okay, that didn't work, what can we do? And as engineers, we do that naturally. Okay, this didn't work, like, how can we make it better? How can we build on this? And I suppose almost striving for perfection, but although I've realised that's not necessarily a good thing. But yeah, so.
Well, that's fantastic, Jamie. A really interesting point. Hopefully we'll be able to come back to that a little later. But for now, we'll move on to our next speaker, Wayne Ellis, Engineering Development Manager at Arriva. Wayne, your engineering career began with an apprenticeship at London Transport, then diverged into automotive, and now you're back working with TfL in a way at a major bus operator, Arriva. For TfL. You have also put your skills on the line at the IRTE's Skills Challenge event, winning the Philip Margrave Award for Outstanding Achievement a few years ago. And you are an ERTEC Master Assessor for the ERTEC scheme, which measures technician competence in heavy vehicles. So you've come up through the system and now maintain some of its standards. So what does working in engineering mean to you, and what are you looking for from apprentices?
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for that, Will. Engineering to me is a passion, and I think that's the ultimate basis you need to work in any kind of industry, but especially in engineering. For me, it was a family thing. I come from a line of people who have been in vehicle engineering, particularly in the bus and coach industry. I have siblings as well as my forebearers now who have worked within this industry. But ultimately, in that, you've got to love what you do. You've got to like what you're going to do. With any career, you need to have a good basis for that. It needs to be not necessarily in your blood, but it needs to be a good basis there for something to do. If you don't enjoy it, you won't last within that industry. You'll move on, you'll get bored. And for me, engineering is a passion. I've loved it since I was a child. I've started working with my brothers even, as soon as I could walk. Being the youngest in my family, and I was always around cars and motorbikes and that sort of thing. And it was only natural, really, for me to progress into this industry. And once I got into it, I realised just how much I actually loved it. And like some of my previous panelists have said, it is progression. Everything is changing, technology is changing, legislation changes, which forces changes within the industry. And you've got to move with the times. Engineering is a process that is always changing, it's always developing, and you need to be able to have that passion to stay with it. If you're not willing to move with the times, again, you'll get bored. And it's got to be something that you really feel that you can develop with. I have myself, as we've spoken about the career path, as you mentioned it there, Will. I did start out, I did an apprenticeship myself. I stayed within the bus and coach industry with the old London Transport, as you said. So thanks for giving away my age there. It's developed from there. I decided to challenge myself. I left the bus and coach industry. I went off into light vehicle, worked for a couple of mainline manufacturers before going into the heavy vehicle sector. Worked for several years in there on different development projects before eventually, and now I decided that bus and coach was my passion. It's where I began, it's where I felt the most comfortable, and that's why I ended up back within Arriva itself, the company that I started from. It's difficult to describe sometimes of why you feel that way. It just feels like home, I think, is the best way to put it, really. I came back as an engineer. I've developed myself over the years, put myself on several different courses, learning different technologies. I was given the opportunity to teach to our own apprentices. I'd had mentors before and had apprentices under me as a mentor. But getting into the teaching program just developed a different passion. It's passing on those skills, those knowledges. watching someone develop and becoming an engineer from someone who's maybe just, they've got an understanding, they've worked with our dad doing a service on their car at weekends, to actually coming in to learn how things work, how everything runs in symmetry, how one thing creates another thing. And it's that development, it's those eureka moments, it's watching those apprentices grow, to develop, to start to understand. That's where the passion comes from. It's watching those young engineers who are starting out on their career start to develop, and that's what it is. That's what engineering is to me. It's a passion that is not just for me, but it's watching others grow and develop. And that's why I ended up moving into the role I'm of now of the development manager. My role now is in charge of not just the apprentices within Ariva, the whole of the UK, but also the entire engineering community. It's my role and my responsibility now to make sure these guys grow and develop to become the best engineers that we've got within the industry. And as for the apprentices, of what we look, is apprentices need to have a passion. They need to be wanting to do this, to learn. As some of the previous panelists have said, there's many routes to take. Personally, for me, it was an apprenticeship. And I've worked with apprentices for years, and I hopefully continue to work with them for many more. Apprenticeships have changed over the years. We've gone from the old MVQ frameworks to the new standards. So it's changed completely. I've been fortunate enough to work with the IMI, the Institute for Apprenticeships, and Ofqual in the development of the new standards, to make sure that these are designed to give apprentices the best education, the best support, the best training that they can have, to make sure that the engineers of the future are given the best basis to start from. Personal ongoing development is a big thing. CPD, we all have to do it. We all have to do CPD within our own careers. And that's what it's about. Apprentices, it is CPD, if you like. That's where they start. It's always learning. It's always pushing themselves, as Jamie said. It's about pushing your boundaries, going to the edge of where you're comfortable with. If you push yourself, you will develop into the best engineer and the best person you can be. And apprenticeships are a great way to do that. We've got a great apprenticeship program within Ariva, and we've invested heavily in a major mentoring program, because apprentices are great, but without the best mentors, they can struggle. And that's one of the things that you need to be aware of, is making sure that the people who guide the apprentices through their apprenticeship make it the best thing possible for them. If they have a brilliant apprenticeship, they're more likely to stay with the company, more likely to push their own boundaries and best develop themselves to try and become the best engineers that they can be. And that, to me, is really what engineering means to me, and the apprenticeships of what we're doing and what we want them to be. That is what I think of apprenticeships.
Brilliant, Wayne. Thanks very much. Your passion and also your sort of care really come across in that. It really does sound like a family business to you, both personally, your personal experience, but also the way you treat your apprentices. So that's great to hear. Thanks very much.
Absolutely. You're
welcome. We've had a question in, which I would like to encourage our attendees to continue to post questions, but I'm going to hold on the questions for a couple more until we get through all of our speakers and give them all a chance to speak, and then we'll open up the floor to questions. So please do keep thinking of your questions and posting them, and we will get to them, but not quite yet. So we've heard from our first speaker, Ian Hoare, who went overseas to do work, but we've not had anybody who was on the sea. But that was the experience of our next speaker, Sharon Gibbs, now an engineer surveyor of pressure systems at Zurich Engineering. So Sharon, your way into engineering was starting with a cadetship with the Merchant Navy as an engineering officer of the watch, and then you worked as a marine design engineer at BAE Systems. You say that your experience has shown that engineering offers a breadth of opportunity. So what do you think are the prerequisites for a person to be able to take those opportunities? Do you have to be a particular type of person or from a specific type of background?
Thanks, Will. Well, firstly, in terms of background, I don't believe you have to be from any specific type of background. I've always had an interest in how things work, even from a young age. However, I grew up in one of Glasgow's biggest housing estates as the youngest of 2 children to parents with absolutely no engineering background at all. The beauty of engineering is that it really is open to everyone from all walks of life, and the opportunities and avenues are available if you're interested and willing to pursue them. In my opinion, the main prerequisites for any role in engineering is a willingness to learn, and I think a lot of the speakers have spoke about this, but willingness to learn with a good work ethic and the drive to improve, both personally and then just in everything that you see in your everyday environment. The willingness to take leaps and risks in terms of job opportunities is also important, as some of the more off-track roles I've taken is what has inevitably led me to this very moment. Being personable and open to different challenges was integral when I started as a cadet. Cadetship is pretty much identical to the apprenticeship, just spending your time on ships rather than in a workplace on shore. Going to sea on a bulk carrier was absolutely outside of my comfort zone, but I was eager for the experience and recognised that the benefit and challenge that it would provide to me far outweighed my initial hesitation and fear. I was the only woman on board with a crew of 30 from all over the world. And when I qualified and moved to cruise ships, I was the only female engineer. However, with a crew the size of a small village, I definitely wasn't the only female on board. My cadetship and time on ship really developed and shaped me as an individual. When I was 20, is when I started my cadetship at Dalrymple College, and when I went to sea, I did a lot of learning both job-wise and personally in those days. And again, it comes back to the emotional intelligence and the maturity that I gained from going to sea and developing myself. It made me appreciate the importance of fostering good working relationships at all levels and afforded me the opportunity to experience and learn about the many different cultures of both my colleagues and the places we visited along the way. My role within Zurich Engineering sees me carrying out pressure inspections to regulatory compliance of pressure vessels, which, although it appears very different to my previous roles, actually requires similar practical experience and allows me to see a growing spectrum of engineering opportunities that are slowly being taken up more and more by a more diverse workforce, and no longer am I arriving onto sites as the only female engineer. It's vital that I add, though, that as a woman in engineering, I am aware that there is still a lack of diversity, of gender, ethnicity, sexuality and equality within engineering roles in the UK industry. And although my experience has never been or never felt hindered or affected by it, I know that's not always the case for a lot of people. However, I am lucky enough to work for an employer that not only acknowledges the issue, but is openly working towards positively changing the industry and improving diversity within their own organisation. Actively creating diversity and inclusion committees to work to ensure the workforce is more open and equal for all is how businesses will start to really represent the communities that they serve. I hope that as time continues to progress, the workforce and the workplace culture also continues to move to a more positive culture that sees engineering roles in all organisations becoming more diverse. With regards to breadth of opportunity, I'd also say that if at first you don't succeed, don't be disheartened. Your career trajectory won't always be linear and blocks may appear along the way. But if you keep taking opportunities that arise, the personal development that they provide will only ever benefit you. I started my cadetship at 20, as I've said, but prior to that, I worked as a chef, and that is the only reason that I really came across cadetships or came across my radar. So again, it was maybe the right place at the right time. And then once I decided to return back to shoreside, I took a job at the Apple store as a genius, thankfully only in job title, fixing customer devices. However, again, if I hadn't taken that detour, I wouldn't have came across the BAE opportunity, which was absolutely an amazing opportunity to take, but it also wouldn't have led me to inevitably this very moment and also working for Zurich, which I'm very much enjoying. So I would just say to everybody out there listening, if they are kind of in the start of their career, or even midway through the career, there really isn't a wrong choice. It's just maybe takes you a little bit longer to get you there, but the development opportunities and experiences will far outweigh any fears or hesitation that you initially had.
Sharon, that's fantastic. Thank you. So I get the feeling from your story that you didn't really have a master plan when you started out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing about plans, is that they can always get derailed. So my plan was always had an interest in learning how things work, and I was always interested in taking my grandpa's clocks and everything apart. I'm pretty sure that's still broken, that clock, but really interested in just seeing the mechanics behind everything. And then that's just kind of school. they kind of, it sounds terrible, but farm you into roles that are more traditional roles. So there's not, you know, there's only so much schools can do as well, and then you kind of have to look at apprenticeships yourself. So maybe when I started out, going into just taking some time out and really getting to know me and knowing what I want to do, led me to engineering. But then it really just was that opportunity that a cadetship offered me. I mean, travelling the world is not a really hardship, I suppose, but just that engineering, hands-on engineering, and massive plant rooms, massive steam environments. Yeah, but there was, that sounds terrible, I shouldn't say that, maybe a lot of people would want to hear that people have plans, but for me, it's, you know, I've probably went around the houses, but every choice that I've made, I don't regret. Every job that I've taken, no matter, you know, where it took me to, no matter how hard or how challenging it was, there was nothing that I regretted when I came away from it, because I knew that that experience would have held me in good stead for anything that I move forward into. And I think, you know, it's still unusual for a lot of people to see women on site, and, you know, I think we do need to kind of still, I suppose, you know, make more of a kind of cultural shift in that aspect.
Well, Sharon, hopefully you're helping fly the flag on that front. So thanks very much for that. Last but not least, I would like to introduce Joe Williams, Manager at Defense Equipment and Support, the MOD. Now, Joe, you joined up at 16 and enlisted in REME and qualified as a recovery mechanic, and have had since in your career tours of duty in Iraq and Afghanistan. Some people might think that an Army life is all action and no thought, but in fact, you've had loads of education, starting with a level 3 NVQ, and you are now studying for an MBA and project management qualification. So has your military path proved to be what you thought it would have been at 16? And why is the military a good place to be an engineer?
Thanks a lot, Will. Thanks for that kind introduction. So just to add clarity, I'm not in fancy dress. I'm actually still serving military now. I'm a Warrant Officer Class 2 in the REME still, the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers. And much as most of the panel, I do really, really love my job. So I'm lucky in that respect that I really enjoy what I'm doing. And as you said in my introduction, I joined at 16 as an apprentice. So same as Jamie, things like that. Straight off the back of my GCSEs, I went off to Army Apprentice College. And the military linked that perfectly. That the day I started my basic training, I also started my apprenticeship in my engineering career as well, which was perfect. All the way through my military career, my military progression and the education and my engineering sides are perfectly linked. So when you see lance corporals and sergeant ranks and progressions and things like, we have class 3, class 2, class 1 of our qualifications, they're all linked perfectly with civilian industry, all the way up to things like iEng and EngTech and Chartered, as Ian was talking about earlier, perfectly linked through now. There's a thread right the way through. I've had a very varied career, and that's how engineering is in the military. My first unit I was working with airborne vehicles, so very lightweight vehicles, and then straight away my second posting was on tanks, main battle tanks, up to 80-ton vehicles and things like that. So it's all about the first principles and the engineering principles that I carried throughout my career wherever I went. So it's a very, very varied career path. The same with locations. We're lucky with a peer group here. A lot of people have been abroad, but I really have been abroad. I spent a lot of my career traveling. Things like I was in Belize for 2 years in the jungle. I've spent 6 months in Norway working at -40, right the way through to the hotter climates that you've all seen on the news, and you mentioned, Iraq and Afghan and things like that. And I was there as a soldier, always soldier first, but I was very much involved in quite heavy level engineering as well. IED damaged vehicles, recovering them, bringing them back, first principles. Fixing vehicles to get them back out, protection, ambulances, things that we need on the ground. And this is where the engineering came into it. You speak to a lot of soldiers and they don't actually realize they're a lot of REME members. They might not call themselves engineers, they might call themselves mechanics, but actually through my career path, I'm very much involved in quite high level engineering at certain points. Also, there's constant CPD within the military. So a few of the mentors have already spoke of this already, but we're constantly career professional development every week, every month. We'll attend our own CPD events, the SOE events like this, but also in-house. And that comes from good mentors. So because of ranks above us have been where we've been before, and we're in such a great peer group, then we're really lucky that there's always someone you can look in front of you and realize what they've done in the engineering sphere and aim towards it. And that comes with friendship and the peer group you're working with as well. So I've been so lucky that every time you're working on an engineering qual, you may be with another 15, 20 people in exactly the same position as you, possibly a very similar age, very similar background. and you become friends for life. So also at the same time as learning my engineering and my army qualifications, I also moved on from that. So you said, why is the military a good place to be for an engineer? It's very progressive. So as I said, I was 16. I had, minimal GCSEs or okay GCSEs, but nowhere near high standard. And now, as you talked, I'm working at master's level education, and the military have given me all of that and give me access to all that, and they paid for it, as they come through. And obviously, I joined as a soldier. I'm a warrant officer now, but you can also join as an officer if you've got a low level, a bachelor's level degree. You could join as an officer and become an engineering officer straight away, which is very similar to what Sharon and people like that have done in the civilian industry. So there's a lot of different career paths you can go through. Has the military provided you what you thought it would have been at 16? I had no plans to stay in for 17, 18 years and up to my 22-year point. I don't think many of the peers would have planned to do a 22-year career, but once you're in and once you're involved and you realize the opportunities it's offering us, then here I am 18 years in, looking forward to my 22, 24-year point and hoping to go further and further. As I said at the start, I really, really do love my job.
Joe, that's fantastic. Well, so there you have it, a really broad range of experience, lots of practical experience, lots of hands-on experience, but also some academic experience as well, showing the breadth and diversity of engineering. So at this point, I'd like to open up the discussion a bit more broadly to answer some of the questions that have been put to us so far by attendees, and also some other questions that have arisen during the discussion so far. So thanks very much, everybody, for your initial comments. So one of the first questions we had is about the international facing element of engineering today. And it's all been made a little bit more complicated with Brexit. The question reads, it's much tougher these days as a number of European professional engineering registering bodies are not accepting UK graduates, unlike in the past, which makes them ineligible for working with engineering industries in countries like Spain, France, and Italy. So is this a concern for you? A number of you have spoken about your professional expertise outside of the UK. How has the changing geopolitical situation affected the prospects for engineers in the UK? Does anyone want to take that one? Ian, can I volunteer you, since you had a lot of experience in Japan, obviously not in the EU, but all the same, must be quite a different working environment there.
Yes, sure. Yeah, so I think that Brexit has certainly affected things. I think something else that's very different in Europe is that the term engineer is a protected title in some countries. So to call yourself an engineer, you actually do have to be registered. But I don't think that detracts from the spectrum of engineering that's available. We call the guy who fixes the boiler, will call himself an engineer. He's working in engineering, but at a different level from someone else working in engineering. And I think that there's a huge spectrum of careers available that are engineering based, and they can be at a technician level where you're hands-on repairing, fixing, building things, right the way through to the person who's designing, innovating, developing, or testing products. So when we look at professional registration in the UK, we've got the different levels. So we've got the engineering technician level that you can achieve with a level 3 apprenticeship. You've then got the incorporated engineer level that you can achieve with a bachelor's degree, and then the chartered engineer level that you can achieve with a master's degree, all with supporting experience. So I can't answer specific to the question in terms of what professional bodies might be doing regarding Brexit and things, but I think the opportunities for engineers in the UK and the structure around professional development and professional recognition in the UK is there for engineers across the spectrum of capability.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Ian, for that. And you had mentioned in your initial comments, talking about the characteristics of chartered engineering from the point of view of what it is to be an engineer. Principles that you believe are valid across all levels, not just chartered, presumably.
Yes, very much so. The standard for professional registration is the same document for each of the levels. It takes the same 5 competencies, but applies a different level to those competencies. So in terms of knowledge and understanding at the engineering technician level, it's having a basic knowledge of some engineering principles and being able to apply things more practically. At the incorporated level, it goes on to being able to design and develop and apply the engineering principles. And then if you go on to the chartered level, it's more about innovation and creativity and coming up with new designs and innovation yourself.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Well, let's turn to a completely different, turn the question on its head in a way and look at entry into engineering. We've had a question here that reads, I have a son who's 10 years old and has decided for a few years that he wants to be a civil engineer. How can I keep him engaged while he's young? And what sort of courses or schemes might he be able to do? Whether or not we can address the specifics of the question, surely engagement among young people is really important. Wayne, could I call on you and ask you to talk a little bit about engagement of young people who might want to be apprentices?
Yeah, sure. It depends really on what you want to do. We've got a program where we actually go around to schools and we get into a little bit of games and that with the youngsters, and then talk to the slightly older children and that about the possibilities of following a career in engineering. But from the sounds of it, from the person who sent in the question, they obviously have a younger child. There are plenty of online activities, even things like the BBC or the CBBC have these bite-sized sessions where you can go on, you can interact and do some of the sessions on there. It's not just the basics of school things, the maths, English, the different languages, science. There are some actual engineering programs out there that you can use. There are various ones. I believe even some of the schools and universities now actually have their own online activities that can be used. It's also now you can do it at home. For parents with younger people who they want to keep, interested in engineering, you don't have to be have a degree in it yourself, but you can always just go and just find out a little bit about engineering and study a little bit yourself at home and create your own interactive things. I think the lockdown last year with homeschooling has shown it a lot, where lots of parents have had to develop their own skills to teach their children at home. And it'll be the same thing. It's just doing a little bit of development yourself and maybe just trying to create some things with the children. If they're looking at civil engineering, it's even from a younger age, things like, building forts at home and just creating, little bridges with your table and chairs and that sort of thing, because that's all part of civil engineering. And it's getting them interested in that and trying to get them interested in how it works. It's just ways of keeping them engaged. There's various ways, and I think that's one of those as a parent. It's you need to have a bit of involvement in it as well, and not just sit them in front of a computer screen or their iPad, but get involved yourself and learn a little bit about it and try and keep them interested in those ways.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Wayne. Thomas, can I call on you? And as an educator, can you talk a little bit about engagement, keeping younger people, getting people interested in and excited about engineering?
Sure. Funny, I was thinking of the very answer for the person who asked the question. My son also happens to be 10, and I think and I'm sure the poor child's going to be an engineer like his dad and his grandfather. But I think the two words I would use are Lego Technic. It's this great stuff. kids will, I mean, you get these kits, of course, and building the kit is fun and everything, but when their creativity really starts going is when they've lost the instructions and they've got a whole bin full of Lego Technic, and it's got all the gears and pulleys and anything you could imagine. And when they start making their own designs and putting stuff together, I'm sure everybody listening, well, certainly the panel, have all had a similar experience with this kind of stuff. So I think to answer the question specifically of the person who asked it is, you know, try and give your kid those opportunities to build stuff themselves. And it doesn't have to be out of Technic, it can be out of ice cream sticks or whatever you like. And the other thing is, if your kid likes civil engineering, you know, try and take him to some building sites and try and show them some buildings going up, or go and look at some big bridges or stuff like that. You know, there's plenty of very exciting stuff to go and look at, and I think that probably keep the engagement. Well, onto your point as educators, I think the way we try and, we've recently at UH rewritten our engineering degrees from scratch. We decided it was time to, and one of the things we've changed completely is introduced design, build and test products and projects. So we give them a problem and they have to design it and build it and test it to try and mirror what we do, you know, what, because eventually in industry we're all going to have, you know, I don't know about you folks, but certainly when I was walking around factories, when the machine stopped, nobody gave me an exam paper to write to fix it. We had to figure it out. We had to do it. And so we're trying to simulate that in the way we teach. And we, you know, so our in each semester, students have got a design, build and test problem. Unfortunately, with COVID at the minute, we're having to give it individually. And we've been sending students kits home to their houses and they're building the stuff at home. But if we weren't in a COVID situation, we would be doing that as group work. And through that, you're also developing all kinds of the sort of interpersonal skills. Because I think as Jamie alluded earlier on terms of resilience and that, when I speak to employers, no, I've never met an employer who said the CAD skills aren't good enough. You know, I've never met an employer who said they need more thermodynamics, but I often meet employers who say they need the interpersonal skills, they need the relationship skills, they need to work with each other. And so at that, you know, as an educator, we're trying to build that into the curriculum. As I said, unfortunately with COVID, we've had our hands tied a bit, but that's kind of the approach we're going is give them design, build and test projects. I hope that answers your question.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much. Just had a note in to mention the plan for the evening. So we're going to carry on with the Q&A, general Q&A and discussion, and I imagine we'll carry on for another half hour, 45 minutes or so. It's a bit fluid when the ending is, but just wanted to give you an idea of how much longer you've got. So there's still plenty of time to ask questions. Please keep them coming so we can make sure that the discussion follows your interests. So I'd like to move to a slightly different area. And Drew, I wanted to pick on you this time. A lot of your career, from what you said, centers around lubrication and let's say fluid systems, rotational systems, and engines, I suppose. How much of in your career, how have you balanced the development of expertise versus the kind of variety? Because you've jumped around a bit, but mostly in that particular sector. Have you been looking specifically to develop your expertise in that one area, or do you get bored and did you want to change a little bit?
Yeah, for me, I'm still fairly junior in my career, so only been with Shell for 10 years, for example. So compared to a number of the speakers here as well, sort of experience is still relatively junior. I'm open-minded and willing to learn. So all the way through my apprenticeship with TTE, the company, the Northwest, who actually hired me initially, that they had the focus. It was completely broad-based. And I've adopted that throughout my career to date. So I try to keep, like, as I say, like open mind, broad based. I touched on instrumental engineering, process engineering, mechanical engineering, and it just so happens like now the natural sort of migration from the F1 role, which was in a way close to laboratory work as well, to be honest, went to a lubrication technical advisor. And again, it's been touched on by the panelists as well, the actual soft skills, project management, relationship management, honesty, integrity, all these things that come with an engineering role, or these transferable skills, which puts you as a prime candidate for a number of different positions, to be honest.
That's brilliant. So we're hearing again and again that whereas you might think an engineering career is all about maths and equations, in fact, it's really about being able to deal with other people.
Yeah, and say, like, again, sort of having a problem solving mindset. So if I recall, my very early passion into engineering was when I was roughly around 10 as well, and I used to subscribe to a magazine subscription based on Robot Wars, a program where you could build sort of small robots. So that's how my passion started there, and always trying to, if it stopped working, trying to figure out, well, why has that stopped working? And always problem solving mindset is key as well, and yeah, hard work. There's under no illusion. Every day is a school day. It's been touched on again a few times that technology changes, and with the change in technology, your expertise and your learning also needs to develop as well. So this is what keeps the days really interesting for me. And yeah, time flies, to be honest, and that's what you want out of a career, I'd say. So you want to sort of wake up in the morning, log onto your PC, and you don't want the day to be a chore. You want to be able to enjoy it. And for the young people out there that are interested in engineering, an engineering career does help you achieve that as well.
Brilliant, thanks, Drew. And Jamie, could I call on you and ask how you've balanced expertise and variety in your career?
Yeah. So I'd say it's very difficult actually to. So when I first started out, I started as an instrument technician. Instrumentation was pressures, levels, temperatures, and flows, and you had experts in it. Now I feel like I'm a bit of a jack of all trades in a way, because like so I'm a controls and instrument engineer, but I know a bit about controls, instrumentation, and with that comes PLCs, SCADAs, all the instrumentation stuff, cybersecurity, which wasn't really around 20 years ago. You know, so you have your finger in a lot of pies, so to speak. But you know, whilst you've got so much variety, you're still your expertise is still in your engineering field. I guess your managers would have, because sometimes when you speak to your peers and managers, although they don't have the same experience and background as you feel like they know as much as you do. So it's quite off-putting in a way, but you know, expertise is still a big thing. It's just like, it's just difficult to describe, you know, because like you say about the variety and everything.
Yeah, well, I mean, it must be so difficult to keep on top of all of the different areas that you need to know, because these systems are holistic. You start with expertise in one area, but in fact, everything's connected to everything else. So to be able to diagnose a system problem, for example, you must have to have all kinds of knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. Like IT, for instance, I mean, that's a completely different field to what I work in, but I still need to have an understanding of network engineering, you know. So it's crazy. Like if I sat back now and just started to list all the things that, you know, I have to get involved with just to do my controls and instrumentation job now, you know, it does branch out into a lot of other areas, which is interesting. And also, again, that's what keeps you motivated, because you're learning so many new things and you need to learn it in order to be able to do your job. So.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Jamie. Okay, moving on. We've had another question about registration and about professional the use and benefits of professional registration. The question reads: can any of our speakers give an example of when they've had to use their CEng, IEng, EngTech recognition to achieve a task? Because I know that each one registration for each of these isn't just a bureaucratic paper filling exercise. There's work to be done, due diligence done that may help focus the mind. Would anyone like to talk about how? Yep, Joe, please carry on.
So a good example in the military, I'm not a chartered engineer, I'm not an officer, but the chartered engineers are given responsibilities that I don't have. So by becoming a chartered engineer, and that's reflected in their rank and their appointment, then they can make engineering decisions that I'm not allowed to do as an IEng or an eng tech at my level. So there's certain things in the Army splits it up very nicely, and it reflects perfectly over to the civilian street qualifications and the PEI qualifications. So the military have fully embraced, especially chartered engineer. That is a very high appointment, and they understand what comes along with being a chartered engineer and how hard it is and the background you have to gain that qualification, and they give you the respect that goes with it.
Thank you, Joe. Sharon, can I call on you? Has qualification been of use in your career, and if so, how?
It's a bit of a trickier one for me because I have just signed up to the SOE with the Edge Tech, but from a kind of meeting the engineering standard, it's came up in a few of my roles, and this is just the first time that I've really taken the time to work on, I suppose, myself to fill it in, but and to, to apply for it. But absolutely, I think that it just shows employers that you meet that standard, and that it gives you confidence when you go into interviews as well. But it will give the employer confidence that you have made the the kind of morality, all of the honesty, just everything that goes part and parcel, those soft skills that go part and parcel of showing that you are also at that engineering standard. And that's why I have very recently, I suppose, made that choice to start applying and to start my application for the IEng as well.
So you won't end at Eng Tech then?
No, so I plan to do the incorporated. I think I'm Eng Tech at the minute. That I have just put my application in, so I did get an email saying that I've been successful. So hopefully, but yes, so absolutely. So IEng, and then through further education, hopefully I will get to the chartered status as well. Obviously, I mean personal development outweighs I think everything else, and I think everybody would admit that. No matter where I see myself 5 years time, I would still like to progress myself, and with that is obviously aiming to become chartered at some point for my own development, and obviously to build the confidence that I kind of obviously want to put out there as well. For obviously I don't plan on leaving Zurich, but also if I was moving to other roles for Zurich, having chartered status just shows that you've met that standard, you've met those criteria, and it's looks proves a point to yourself that you can do it.
That's fantastic. Thanks very much, Sharon. Okay, so turning now to talk about the future of engineering opportunities in the sector. I mean, one of the things that's come up a lot, Jamie's mentioned that she's felt that she's had to develop herself and evolve almost. The question I'd like to ask the panelists is, where do they see their sectors going, and will the skills that are available right now whether through apprenticeships or through universities, will they remain representative of where our country and our industries are going, or are there some gaps that are emerging, and if so, how do we address those? So let's see, can I ask Jamie? Yes, please.
Yeah, so currently I work in energy from waste, so I'm looking after energy recovery facilities, which are taking waste that can't be recycled, and then we're making it into electricity or using it for district heating, that sort of thing. So this sector is going to be around for a while, and it's constantly developing. So I would say I've made a little list of specific areas that I've noticed recently that are really starting to take off, and there's a definite skills gap. I mentioned one earlier is cybersecurity. So this is like a really big thing now, especially in industrial control systems, and there is a gap there. So a skills shortage certainly, and products and innovations that need to be developed. So cybersecurity specifically in industrial control systems. Remote access has been a big thing, certainly in the last year, because of obviously lockdown, coronavirus and everything. So remote access, not just like what we're doing now, but I mean also specifically to industrial control systems like SCADAs and PLCs, you know, like into the control room, like the area, like we can't give outside access. So it's there are solutions out there, but because of developing cybersecurity, they're not always practical solutions. So again, that needs to be developed. And big data is a thing at the moment. So with the cloud, they're looking at, they just want, like people would just want loads of data. So for instance, I do instrumentation, like all my instruments, pressures, levels, temperatures, flows can show different aspects of the plant, like if something isn't quite working as it should, if it could be finely tuned. So all that data, which is a lot of data for each site, they want out into the cloud. So just getting the data out, cybersecurity again is a big factor. And once it's out there, data analysts looking at that data, machine learning is like a new thing, well, not that new, but you know, it's developing thing, machine learning and analytics, specifically for the control environment. So you can do predictive and planned maintenance programs using that data. So I'd say remote access, cybersecurity and big data are gaps from my perspective that would be good for people to get into.
Jamie, fantastic. Thanks very much. Wayne, you had your hand up.
Yeah, well, I did. The road transport industry is having to change immensely. With the announcement recently from the government that they're bringing forward the ban on sales of purely fossil fuel vehicles. Obviously, hybrid technology and electric vehicles is going to be the future for road transportation. And as such, it's been identified that there is a gap. You know, we talk about apprenticeships, and these things are picked up on that. You know, part of the big shake-up that we've done with the review of the bus and coach standards is also part of integration of hybrid technology within that standard. It was always done as a standalone qualification, but we're now having to incorporate that because technology is advancing. And it's those sorts of things that we need to look at and identify as future technologies. You know, we're looking at hybrid, we're looking at hydrogen fuel cells, you know, we're looking at all of these latest innovations that are coming through. And we need to make sure that, especially from the younger generations that are coming through, they're given this knowledge and skills right from the start so that they're not behind. They need to be coming in with the advantage to be able to progress quickly and learn these skills and make sure that they have the upper hand on the advancement of technology. And I think that's one of the areas where things are starting to advance. And I think we're looking at the future advancement of things, and we're starting to realise that early now and trying to not fall behind with things. You know, especially in the education sector now, of where they're trying to make sure that we do cover what is required.
Thank you, Wayne. Sharon, you had your hand up as well.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to piggyback on that as well, just to say, I think not only, I suppose, towards new technology, but also kind of old technologies like steam. Not many people have steam, you know, experience anymore. And I think that's something that, you know, definitely Zurich and SAFED are starting to look into, kind of continuing apprenticeships for people to then kind of move into, I suppose, the engineer surveyor role, because not all people will have the qualifications and the experience within STEAM. And I think, you know, it is just making sure that there's more apprenticeships available for people to get into these kind of roles as well.
Fantastic that it's not only new technology, but also old technology. Fantastic. Thank you for that point, Sharon. Jamie, you had your hand up too.
Yeah, I was just going to go off the back of what Wayne was just saying there. Was one of the ERFs that's in London, we're actually looking at making electric refuse collection vehicles at the moment. So Veolia are innovating, and we need engineers to help us do that. So yeah, it's just loads of opportunities are out there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jamie. Ian, sorry, Drew, I'll get you in just a sec, but Ian, I just wanted to ask from a BAE Systems point of view, what's your feeling about how things are changing, how things are evolving?
I think there's a whole host of things that are changing. So I'm a mechanical engineer, and something that springs to mind is all the technologies around manufacturing, in particular 3D printing. There are some phenomenal new materials being developed and new processes being developed so that we can 3D print. And what that means is you can create objects in any form that you like. You're not restricted by whether a cutting tool can access it and create the shape, or whether an injection molding tool can come together and then come apart and you can get the part out. You can create these organic shapes in your design, and that, coupled with the advances in computer-aided engineering, is allowing engineers to be far more organic in the type of things that they produce. It's also giving significant cost savings by allowing something that might have been 5 parts in the past to be built on the 3D printer as a single part. So I think going forward, in the mechanical scheme at least, the way people work and the type of products that are developed and created will change significantly in the future.
Thanks, Ian. Drew, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly piggyback on the comments made earlier as well. Sustainability is at the forefront of everybody's mind. So yeah, I completely agree. Battery technology is going to evolve, renewable energy is going to evolve, and even throughout industry, there's a massive focus from a lubrication point of view, but also a product development point of view on total cost of ownership for the manufacturer and end customer. So yeah, throughout this process, there's going to be engineers involved drastically in product and development.
Brilliant, Drew. Thanks very much. So I just want to encourage our audience to again submit questions on the Q&A. We've still got some time left to answer questions, but not that much. So I'd say get them in now. And I'd like to put a comment that has been submitted through the Q&A to the panel. Comment reads, professionals working in diverse industries need to keep updating their knowledge, soft and hard skills as part of CPD, so that they're up to speed with the changing skill set required in industry. Skills gaps occur because professionals don't take individual professional development seriously, as well as keeping up to date with new skills down the line. So what do people think about CPD and about how they manage their own CPD? Do people, is that a common view? Do people how do people react to that? I mean, is it down to the engineer to keep up their competence, and how do they do that when they're already working in what must be a very demanding job? Who haven't we heard from? Well, Joe, can I ask you, calling you about that?
Yeah, CPD is essential. Working with a POI with the SOE has just been a game changer for me and an eye opener, because I was in a bubble of the military engineering, and it's a diverse bubble. Is, like I said, from airborne to the heavy tanks, but it was a bubble. And then working on events like this and CPD events when I could go before COVID, and then virtually afterwards, is just really opened my eyes to things like we've talked about, the electric vehicles, the environmental sector, and all these impacts and things that come through, and it's all come from CPD. So CPD is at many different levels within the military and outside the military. So it can be from working with your line manager and just passing down information, or you passing up information, and right the way up to high level CPD from the organization, where they should be pushing down technologies. I think we should all be looking forward at all times. If you're just looking directly where you are, you've missed the point. Where everything's evolving. I work predominantly with vehicles, and it's just changing so much every day. The new vehicles we're getting in are just so different that CPD is essential to keep on top of the game. And if, as an engineer, as a good engineer, you should be keen to look forward. You should be wanting to do that. I think is a key skill for an engineer, to be looking ahead at what's coming, not as well as backwards, as we said.
Brilliant. Thomas, can I call on you now? I'll get you a second, Drew, thanks. But just wanted to ask Thomas, from academia, I mean, academics are always reading and always learning and passing on that knowledge. So how are your interfaces with industry? And you're obviously not as much hands-on as you used to be. Is there a risk of missing out on some of those CPD opportunities?
Yes, I think there is a risk. I think certainly amongst that. I mean, when I was a student, I remember one of my profs saying that university is a place where you learn more and more about less and less until eventually you know everything about nothing. And I think some of my colleagues who sort of go down a research rabbit hole, do have that risk. But I think sort of taking a step back, which is I think maybe where your question is going, is I think that regardless of where you find yourself, probably the most important thing we can do is to be, I mean, it's a bit of a tired phrase, but is this concept of lifelong learning. You know, I'm in the business of teaching, of learning, that's my trade, if you like. But I myself am busy with a part-time PhD, and we're trying to, that's what I say to my students again and again, don't think you're here to learn about thermodynamics. You're here to learn about how to learn about thermodynamics, because, I went to university in the 1990s. I mean, if you had told me we'd been walking around with as much computing power as they launched a space shuttle with in our pockets, I wouldn't have believed you. These things didn't exist when I was walking around. And that's true of anybody going through studies now. As the stuff you're studying as a student, well, put it a different way, the stuff you're going to be encountering in 20 years' time hasn't been invented yet. So you need to know how to learn. And that may well be the most important thing of it all. And what makes learning easy, I mean, the question, and I don't mean to be unkind to the person who asked it, maybe suggest that CPD is some sort of burden or duty you have to perform. And my thinking is if you love engineering, if you're passionate about it, and a question sometimes asked, what advice do you give to young people, is find something that you love. Because if you absolutely love something, then learning more about it is not a hard task. Will, you'll be delighted to know that I'll read your magazine, Operations Engineer, cover to cover every month. I haven't been in industry, I haven't been in a factory for a length of time for some time, but I love the subject matter. And so it's not a burden for me to read it. And I think that's the trick. If you find something you love, it's not going to be hard work to keep up to date.
Thank you. I think we should all have that as a key take-home message, that operations engineer is great. So Drew, you had a comment.
Yeah, just another short comment from my side. So once the audience are in a role as well, in terms of your personal development, don't be afraid to challenge your line manager and basically say how you want to develop and where you see yourself in a few years' time as well, and where you want to go. Within Shell, I've been very lucky that we have what we call the individual development plan, and every year this is an evolving document. It never stands still. I add new things constantly. I write in there potential sort of like end career goals, where I want to be, areas of development, work on them, set up tasks and targets to develop these areas, and also as well document strengths as you gain new competencies. Make sure you keep a note of them as well. But yeah, I think it has to be self-driven. You need to have that motivation to progress and to develop your own personal skills. But at the same time as well, you need support from your peers as well, line manager and stuff like this.
Thank you, Drew. Jamie, you had a point to make.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the skills gap comment. Skills gap because professionals don't take it seriously of individual professional development. But I think that's a bit unfair. There's a lot of professionals out there that are very passionate about what they do, and they do take things seriously, but going along with what Thomas said, what things in 20 years' time are going to be completely, haven't even been thought of right now. So what actually happens is skills gap occurs from things like what I said about earlier, cybersecurity. So that's a whole industry and a whole level of expertise in itself. I have an understanding of cybersecurity. I obviously have to implement cybersecurity on my sites, but really it's really taken off, and there's a skills gap there, and people need to become professionals in cybersecurity specifically now. It's like a whole thing in itself. It's not something that I can manage as a controls and instrumentation engineer anymore. It's a whole thing in itself. So yeah, I just wanted to pick up on it being a little bit unfair.
No, sure. I mean, things change, and that's a really great point. Thanks for making that. comment. So just a final call then for questions. I've got a couple more here I'd like to go through. And then if there's nothing else from the floor, then we'll aim to finish off. So one question that I'm smiling now because it's a little bit of a difficult question. And the question that I'd like to ask you all, if you'd be so patient, is what would you have done differently? I mean, we've heard such great stories about how you've developed your careers. Is there anything that you would like to have done differently? Some learning about career development that might benefit someone else? I don't want to call on anyone. Drew, thanks very much for offering to take that one.
Yeah, I'll go first. So with my sort of career to date, I just wish I invested more time when I was younger to learn another language, because that does open doors as well.
Thanks, Drew. Well, that speaks also to the Brexit issue. Thanks very much. Thomas, you had your hand up as well.
I wish I had done more formal education earlier in my life. I left university when I finished my degree, and I'm now, in my late 40s, studying part-time, and it's hard, man. And so I wish I had done more formal studies earlier in my career.
Well, I'm sure that we're all with you on that. It's a really tough thing to do part-time education. So it's nothing to be sniffed at at all. Would anyone else like to volunteer? I'm not going to call on anyone on this. It's up to you. Joe, yes.
Just with the PEIs and the SOE, I wish I'd engaged a lot earlier and started going to the events earlier. I was a little bit scared, a little bit thinking it wasn't for me, but as soon as I got there, I realized there was so much opportunity and networking and other things that come from the SOE and the PEI events in general. Obviously, COVID's put us online, but especially when the world starts turning again, I will be attending as many events as I can.
So Joe, can I actually just pick up that point then? What does it take to get involved with the SOE, and how did you find it the first time?
So yeah, the military got me onto EngTech. Basically, I'd done my level 3 and I'd done a certain career point, and then I was automatically became an EngTech, which was fine. I didn't really understand too much of it, but I went through the SOE and I started getting the emails and the magazines and the CPD events, and I didn't do anything with it. It was just spam to me at first, and then at one point I engaged, and my eyes were just opened, and I speak, the people I'm speaking to today, Shell, Formula One, big industry and things like that. It's well outside my bubble, and it's all come from PEI, from the SOE and CPD events such as this. Anyone who's attended this webinar obviously gets it, that's why they're here, but I wish I'd done it sooner. I wish I'd engaged earlier and not treated it like spam, and realized what it was and the opportunity it was creating. And as we talked about CPD, we've gone about that, but the CPD opportunities are just amazing that come from the PEIs.
Thank you. Ian, may I ask, how did you engage with SOE or one of its partner organizations originally?
So I guess my background is mechanical engineering, and from university I was a student member of the organisation, which I know the SOE do a similar scheme, and all the way through that I had set myself a goal of becoming a chartered engineer. So I went through university, I knew what was required, I kept logbooks, and worked towards meeting the competencies that were required. So I guess I was disciplined in myself to have a structure to what I was learning, what I was developing, made sure I was talking to my employers, making sure they were aware that that was my objective and my goal, and they were very supportive of that and were able to give me the opportunities that I needed to gain that experience, knowledge, and competency. I think if individuals understand what they need in terms of the competencies required and how they can achieve that, then the employers can provide those opportunities, because without the opportunities you won't get everything that you need.
That's great, Ian, and thanks for your input there. You had much more. It sounds like you had you were driven and had a goal that you were aiming for a long time. So that's fantastic. So I'd like to just close out with the last question for everybody then, and that is just tips for young engineers. Do you have any tips for people who are starting out, maybe still apprentices, apprentice level, or maybe in their early years of careers? Jamie.
Yeah, so I would say if you enjoy what you do, everything else will just fall into place. Remember work-life balance, but work hard at the start, and it'll just work for you. And two things that you're in total control of are your attitude and your effort. So just remember those things, and neither of those things are necessarily skills that you're going to learn from a degree or anything like that, but they are soft skills, and they're very important, and they will help you whether you choose to be a graduate or start with an apprenticeship and go on to be a graduate, or whatever you choose, those will get you somewhere. And I just wanted to also say, sometimes the smallest step in the right direction ends up being the biggest step of your life. So just make that step, recognize opportunities, and just go for it. That's what I wanted to say.
Brilliant, Jamie. Thanks so much. Sharon, can I call on you?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think Jamie's said it perfectly. But what I would say is just, take risks, don't be worried that you think you're coming off track, or you're not going to be following the same path as everyone else, because, your path might be different, but, if you focus on what you're doing and you work hard, there's, you'll absolutely go to exactly where you want to be, as long as, you stay focused and you stay passionate about what you are doing.
Thanks very much, Sharon. Joe.
Yeah, just with education, that just believe you can do it. I mean, I started with GCSEs at 16, and now I'm working on my masters, and obviously there's people in the audience. We've got quite a motivated audience here, so they're doing the same. But if someone tells you you can't do it, just consider that a challenge and just challenge yourself. And we talked about adult education and things like that. The sky's the limit. You can keep going, and there's plenty of agencies and help out there for you to do that now. It's really acceptable, so just keep pushing further and further. Don't stop.
Thanks, Joe. That's fantastic. Ian.
Yeah, I'd just say, relish challenges and opportunities when they come along. Go out and look for them, but also remember that you're not alone. There are a lot of experienced engineers out there in the world, like the rest of the panel. We would all love to help you, love to share our knowledge and experience. So if you do feel you're stuck or you're struggling, just put your hand up and ask for help. And certainly where we are, any engineer will be more than willing to help the younger engineers along.
Thanks, Ian. That's great. Drew.
Yeah, everyone's comments are perfect, to be honest. But yeah, maybe just to add that the small sacrifices that you might make now in terms of staying in one night to study, while other people are going out, do pay dividends in the long run. And that's proven in my case with all the part-time study I've done, achieving Student of the Year. And yeah, that certainly opened doors in my career into F1. So yeah, hard work really does pay off. Stay at it. You might hit some speed bumps along the way, but yeah, be determined, and you can define your own destiny in a way.
Thank you, Drew, and I'm sure your career has been evidence of that. Thomas.
Most people have said it before me, but I make this observation for those for any young people who are about to embark on their studies, however that may be, is that I never ever met a student who worked hard and failed. So now you may not get 99%, but every student I met who really put their head down and diligently worked through it, did pass it, did pass whatever it was. And when I look at my students in terms of those who've graduated and who've gone on to work and the different jobs they've got, it's the distinction of, can I say, sort of successful and less successful is definitely, just as everybody else has said, it's sort of motivation and just working hard. There's no magic to it. It's just diligence. And my observation is that young people who are willing to work hard and go for it is more scarce than you might think. That's why we're all saying it's so valued, because we don't see it as much as we'd want to. And then when you do see somebody who's really motivated and willing to put in the hours and the work, they really do well. So it's not a magic recipe. It's just, but sadly, I also don't have any shortcuts. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. That's great. I suppose that one other question I'd just like to ask is about where you think there are some good opportunities. What I mean to ask is, what sort of companies out there are offering some good opportunities for engineers and engineering development? I mean, if you'd like to mention your own company, I'd be grateful. Otherwise, if you've seen some interesting opportunities in general, I'd be interested to know what sort of options there are for people getting into engineering, first job, early job stuff. Joe, you have your hand up.
So just within the military, obviously, I'm going to sell that, aren't I? But we've got 2,300 apprentices at the minute. We've had 505 complete under COVID. So, you know, both entry levels, either soldier level or with a degree to officer level, are really appealing at the minute. And we're always looking for new people to come through the military engineering route.
Ian, BAE Systems is a huge, it must have a huge program.
Yeah, we've got programs at all levels. I think this year we're taking on, I forget the numbers, but over 600 apprentices. We have a graduate program as well. But also for people at school, we offer a lot of work experience programs that you can come and spend a week with us. We're even doing them through remote means this year. And we offer summer placements, we offer industrial placements for those studying at university. So there is a whole range of pathways and routes where you can either get experience or you can come onto an apprentice scheme or a graduate scheme.
And Drew, yeah, please.
Yeah, big advocate for TTE, Training Tomorrow's Engineers, which is the apprenticeship program that I undertook in the Northwest, based in Ellesmere Port. They take on hundreds of apprentices each year, and they're sponsored by the leading companies in industry out there. So Urenco, SR, Ineos Claw, Shell. Yeah, so just look it up.
Thanks, Drew. Jamie, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, from what Ian was saying there, Veolia also offer really good apprenticeship and graduate programs, and even as an employee of Veolia, you can go on and do further apprenticeships or qualifications, like I'm doing my master's at the moment. So there's plenty of opportunity to learn and develop within Veolia. And also, obviously, I didn't start my career there. I've been in the water industry and the petrochemical industry. There's some great apprenticeships out there. I think the government website lists quite a few as well. So just have a look around and see what you're interested in. Bit tricky at the moment with COVID, but you know, some offer open days and things like that. Just do a bit of research and just see what works for you and just go for it.
Thanks, Jamie. Sharon.
Yep, and just, you know, as I said previously, you know, SAFED are starting to now look into doing or, you know, improving apprenticeships within the kind of engineering surveyor route as well, if people are interested in getting into a kind of compliance role.
Yeah, what is the route into engineering surveying? I mean, are there there must be set qualifications?
Yeah, absolutely. So with Zurich and SAFED have worked together to kind of come up with an apprenticeship plan, and they take level 3 NVQs with, you know, some experience, not a massive amount of experience, and they take them through the apprenticeship up to level 4, level 5, and then, you know, by that point they're fully fledged engineer surveyors with the experience that goes with it from being on site and shadowing other surveyors.
Can you come into it as an engineer from another field, as a, you know, operator and doing something else?
Absolutely, there is different routes for engineer surveyors. There's electrical, LAV, lift and crane, and then pressure systems. So it would just be whatever your kind of skill set is closest linked to. So more mechanical, maybe more mechanic. You'd maybe look at lift and crane. I've got obviously steam background, so more pressure vessels. If you're electrical, obviously electrical surveyor. So there is a breadth of routes. There's also, if you know, there's also small kind of like power press playgrounds as well come under, you know, statutory inspections, as bizarre as that sounds, but these are all just kind of additional things. But obviously the 4 big routes are electrical, LAV, pressure, and lift and crane.
Brilliant, great. Okay. Well, I just should ask if anyone else wants to make any final comments. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap up the session. And in doing so, I'd like to thank our panelists for giving their time, their expertise, and really really fantastic range of comments on all levels as well. And it's so exciting to see the range of things that people do and the range of concerns that you get from engineers. It's just so diverse. And I'm so grateful to you all for sharing your time and your passion. It was so interesting to hear your experience. So thank you very much, and thank you to the attendees who stayed with us to the end. This session will be posted on the SOE website, but for now, just like to say good night. Thank you very much.